Welcome to the classic battle of good and evil. This is being filmed on Memorial Day to soldiers, and it's going to get a bit brassy and offensive. So if you're offended, just scroll on, please. Okay, let's get started. There's World War I and World War II, and both times the United States went over, won, and then turned around and went home. There's the Korean War. I think we're still fighting that. The Vietnam War was an example of the military strategy of just letting everybody fight and fight, and then they get tired and go home, and then the bad guys come in, shoot up the place, and take it over. In fact, a decade later, when the United States was talking to the North Vietnamese generals who won, they said they were ready to lose except for the protests in the United States. Those protesters turned around and changed our society, and they're the people you've been defending. Well, let's keep this up. There was President Carter in the late 70s who got a genuine peace agreement in Israel, only to find that Egypt, the terrorist group, shot up the president of Egypt and took it over. And in Iran, they threw out the king. They brought in one of the Ayatollahs. They took over the embassy and simply shot the place up. And again, we lost. Let's keep this up. And a year later, when President Jimmy Carter got into office, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, and he decided to do the same thing to the Russians that they were doing to us, the same strategy. So they started supplying the people in Afghanistan with weapons and things such as Stinger missiles, and they were fighting. Osama bin Laden got in there, but he had a different group. He represented the Arabs, and he was a rich Saudi Arabian kid. He could buy his own troops, pay for the arms himself. I keep something around from that era. This is a copy of Soldier of Fortune magazine from the year 1990. And then I keep it around because in the back, those guys are raising money for the troops for the freedom fighters in Afghanistan. The freedom fighters. And it didn't work out well. If I got things right, in all fairness, the United States was defending the average Joe, and the Soviet Union had enough and went home and left a puppet government. And Osama bin Laden got in there, and the Arabs, and shot the place up and took it over, and it all fell into a hellhole. The guys who genuinely lost, well, the guys that our troops were supporting, the average Joe. Then there was the first Gulf War, where the military phrase was to hunker down, and didn't accomplish anything. Although I do understand that some companies were American that took that controlled the oil wells. And the second Gulf War, you went in, you threw out Saddam Hussein, if I remember the name right, and then you went into Afghanistan and spent 20 years doing exactly what everybody, the one strategy that constantly works. And then you went home and nothing was accomplished. I'm getting the idea here. Now let's go back to the 1970s. The communists said in the 50s they would overthrow the United States in the 1970s, and they did. There was a change of society. They threw bombs in the street. And for the violent overthrow of the United States government and replacing it with communism, says Angela Davis, a university professor, and she's still around putting her fist in the air and getting $30,000 a speech for it, if I understand things right. Jane Fonda was sitting on an artillery piece bragging how they stopped the bombing in Cambodia and now they can go to work. And there she is in a bespoke house living in Malibu and causing what turns out to be a 5-mile long skid row in Los Angeles. And there she is out there with Joan Baez bragging, still doing the same thing. And let's see, what else? Oh, Donna Shalala, the first female black Surgeon General. If we hadn't got everything we wanted, we would have tore it all down, she says. And they did. They were violent, and they changed our society. You don't realize it, but we were the world citizen. We were a normal, well-adjusted person, which is not a natural thing. And then we became good husbands and good fathers, and it spilled into home economics. And it was working. You were a mechanic and you got married, you could afford a 3-bedroom brick house and a half-acre lot. And that was something that was unique in the history of human beings on this earth. And they threw all that out. And that includes the military. There's a change in our society, includes the change in our attitude, and includes the military. They were bought out and then they sold out for 20-year retirement, well, and of course Social Security, and of course free medical care, and of course this and every benefit you could possibly have. They turned the Air Force Base into a retirement community, and so we're going to have to. Why or who do they defend? Well, they don't defend the good guys. Boy, I get to sneak in something personal here. I was around, that was my age when I was coming into being. And I'm nobody, but I took this stuff seriously. And every time you tried to do something that went against it, guys, for example, would join the military only to find they were taking orders from the very people they're supposed to stand up to. And the same is true with the social worker types. And so if you did anything that was the right, excuse me, if you did anything that was considered the right thing to do, you looked horrible. And if you did anything that looked so darn tough, well, it wasn't. And just to get something else, if you're listening to this and you're a military type, out that door, there's a flag flying for Memorial Day. The University of Arizona is a short mile down there, right behind you. You're going to have an awful lot of problems finding a university professor that flies a flag. They have a completely different attitude, and you defend them. In fact, if you go a mile or so that way, where all the houses skyrocket in price, and they used to be doctors and lawyers and university professors. Well, before Donald Trump took office, they were talking about how you must be fair and let everybody in, and they wanted a world government, I guess. And as soon as Donald Trump came into office, well, it was you must defend the Constitution and you must stand up to kings and that sort of thing. They were not for the Constitution before he came into office. Remember something else. Donald Trump ran standing up to a bum's rush, but nothing's changed yet. The same judges who were railroading the guy, the same Banana Republic judges, they're still in office. The same George Soros was at his I can't say it. The party he has when he became president, there's George Soros, the guys that everybody is supposed to hate. And what else did they do? They went into Venezuela, and then they turned around and left. And now you're in the Gulf and not doing much of anything. So let's have a sense of category. As much you better come out and very consciously not have much respect at all for the guys who are about 50 years old and up in the military. They were bought out, and they went from marching with good posture to goose stepping, and somebody better say something about it. And on the same hand, not on the other hand, but on the same hand, you better hope and support like mad the military guys who are about 40 years old and under. The lives of millions of people are going to depend on them. And if they do the things they say they're going to do, crash our economy so we end up pitching a tent at the bottom of a 100,000 seat abandoned football stadium, and it looks like that's what's happening. It all comes down to violence, and you're going to have to step up to it. As a matter of fact, the United States did represent the world citizen, and if you notice, in places like England, there's the president who's supporting the communists and the economic and communist China, the economic system. And then there's a whole different group, which is pretty much most Brits, and they're supporting the being normal and well-adjusted. You can also include Mexico with that. This is coming to you from Tucson, and perhaps you should have a sense of category and get people who want to be Yanks over here, no matter where they're born, and people who don't want to be Yanks over there, no matter where they're born. And that includes, well, perhaps the Mexican government, who's a communist government, who's made up of a Jewish atheist, a Jewish communist, feminist. Maybe they should stand down, get a garbage sack, go form a class of peasantry beneath the class of poverty that they caused. And the other Mexican guys, the ones who surrounded the churches during and protected themselves from the United Nations Feminist Day, well, they come. You grab them, they come up over here, and now you're back in business. You see the point? Well, there are some things you can do right now. You can take violence out of the equation. You're the military guys, and the minute you don't have to face violence, you can talk about a lot of issues that are with a great sense of clarity, and you can be free about it. You can come up with a course. The military is exceptionally good with that, at teaching a fella first a sense of original sin, and then how to stand up to a cheap pimp. It's not about communists. It's the cruel, queer, atheistic communist and fascist against the Yank. You're a young man. You close your eyes. You fantasize about sex. You separate the act of sex from the act of getting the gal pregnant, or you place sex instead of getting the gal pregnant and start a family. Your job, young man, in the military is to take a baseball bat to the queer scoundrels and go over there and get the gal pregnant. And there you go. You're back in business. Then you can teach a fellow how to stand up to a bum's rush, how to stand up to people who hustle. Home economics is what they threw out. The idea that the married couple was a basic economic unit, and that's how you had a detached house. That's it. You got people out of poverty and into plenty. They threw all that out, and that's what you're going to have to stand up to. What else can you do? If you're a retired military guy, well, when faced with institutional corruption, you turn to individual effort, and the United States still represents the idea of being a Yank, so somewhere out there, there must be a retired military guy. You can throw a fit. You can insist that they place this banking system under the auspices of the United States government, and you can insist that they go straight into the Middle East, they take over those oil wells, they adopt the American dollar. If there is no God, then you guys get yourself a Cuban cigar and enjoy yourselves. If Christ rose on the third day, well, it takes a minimum of 3 generations to economically develop a third world country. And the first generation has 1 foot in one world and 1 foot in the other, and that sort of thing. They can work their way in the gang in the playground. They can wear clothes that fit, wear clothes that fit with a style. And I have a feeling the standard of living for people in Iran would skyrocket. I don't think they would mind. Just to sneak something else in, you can think of Britain. If Britain joined the United States, the good side of Britain and Canada, at first it would feel emotionally overbearing, whatever the word is. But then wait a minute, you're imposing an argument of decency. We're being a bunch of Yanks here. So the second thing you would do is give the Brits back the Suez Canal. And those oil wells, they built the darn things. I couldn't care less if somebody from Texas runs the oil company or the good guy from Tollesbury, England runs it, as long as they're a bunch of Yanks. I don't think anyone else did either. That was the United States. That was our fault. We were huge and so much stronger than everybody. We just assumed that the good guys would just come and join the gang, and they didn't. Well, you got the idea. Tonight, it might do you well to have a bit of empathy. On the computer, you can go to Vietnam, and you can see guys who were drafted, who fought so hard and died halfway around the world. Nurses, I was just looking at nurses, and have some empathy. Then you can see the guys protesting and the ones who won, and the difference in attitude. You can see the first female West Point cadet, and you realize there's a change of attitude that's not very good and not very nice. Then you can have a sense of empathy and realize the gal who has a child and she's got to pay medical bills and rent and utilities. Rent, we don't rent property around here, remember? We own our own houses and we become responsible citizens. They threw out the American housewife. And the guy is trying to come up with money to pay the bills and put shoes on the kids' feet. There was a time when you arranged the parameters of competition so that there was home economics, so that a guy made enough money to support a wife and kids, and the gal can run the household. They're viewed as a single unit. There's other anecdotes. Well, you can do something else. There's a YouTube channel called The Priest or the Pimp. Please join it. There's a Facebook and X and Instagram and hopefully Truth Social. And on X and Instagram and Facebook, it's called Time to Act. Donald Trump ran standing up to a bum's rush, and I've been very conscious to look for things where somebody's made a suggestion. What do you do? Nobody's given him any advice. Quite frankly, he isn't even a politician. He's just a goofy guy who knows how to build things. And it would help if somebody made some suggestions. We can tell him exactly what's wrong, exactly what to do about it, and exactly how to do it. And you have to join the gang. So I hope you do. Happy Memorial Day.